Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Sex with Ashley. I am your host, Ashley. And so today we are talking about menopause, right? And I have Omi here, Omi Burney-Scott, who is also from North Carolina, like me. NC, North Carolina. Come on and raise up. Come on. And so she has a platform or what is it? It's not a social.
It's a reproductive justice platform called the Black Girl's Guide to Survival.
Yeah, the Black Woman's Guide to Menopause. And so, I want you to first tell us who you are. Tell us why you started the Black Woman's Guide to Menopause. What makes you the expert? Because everybody want to feel like, well, how she the expert? So tell us why you the expert, and then we'll get into our conversation.
Okay. All right. Well, let's see. First thing I would say is, well, my name is Omisade. My pronouns are she and her. I'm a seventh generation North Carolinian. I have been able to trace my mom and dad back, all in Eastern North Carolina, 7 generations. And that's deep, Ashley, to be able to go back that far. And so I really take that seriously. I love the fact that I'm seventh generation North Carolinian. I have been doing social justice work full time as my chosen offering, my chosen career for 30 years. That has looked like economic justice, reproductive justice, racial justice, voting rights, things like that. I have about 15 to 18 years of experience specifically in repro justice. And I launched it's actually the Black Girl's Guide to Survival while I was on a sabbatical from social justice work. Like I found myself in a place in 2018 where I was really exhausted. And I wanted to just have conversations with my friends who live in this community. Like I live in Durham, North Carolina. I'm really lucky to live in a community that feels like it lives at the intersection of creative work and social justice. Like people are always doing really cool things. So I knew I was going to have some great conversations, and then I didn't realize I was going to pop a cork on something. I had not expected that. And I think I don't consider myself an expert. I do consider myself a person with first person experience with menopause. I'm 12 years postmenopausal. So I went through perimenopause in my late 30s, and then I had my last menstrual cycle when I was 45. So when I started the Black Girl's Guide, initially it was just going to be some audio storytelling. We were going to use a podcast as a platform, and then it quickly expanded from there to do really deep narrative and culture shift work around menopause and expanding the conversation to focus on Black women, Black genderqueer folk, Black trans folk, Black non-binary folk. So we run the gamut. It is intergenerational. We're talking to people who experience menopause in their 20s, their 30s, their 40s, their 50s, their 60s. And oftentimes, we'll have folk who say, well, I'm not ready for that conversation about menopause because I'm not there yet. It's like, you're not sure if you're there yet, actually. And if you're a Black person with a uterus and ovaries, you might get there quicker than you anticipate. So we want to make sure you have good information that you can trust. And our stories are really important.
So I often say that, I blame the older generation because there should be like a handbook or something that tells us what the hell happens to our body after 35. Because like you just wake up one day and it's like, God dang, like all this stuff is happening and no one told me. Like no one told me like my knees were gonna start hurting. No one told me like all these things about my body. No one told me.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, how do we start having the conversation so we
Yeah.
can make it real? Like,
Yeah.
how do we have that conversation about menopause? Because, like, I'm 40, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even, my mother, she's postmenopausal at this point. She's in her 60s. But, like, I remember when she was going through it because she was like, oh, she was happy because she didn't have a period no more. Like, oh, I have a period. Like, and then, she was, so I remember that, but I don't remember, like, when that exactly was. We never had a conversation about it. I don't know what to expect
Right.
with menopause. I know my mama, she didn't really have the hot flashes, and typically, so is it a thing if your mother experiences something, your process is going to be similar to hers, or what it
It really all depends. For me, this makes me want to ask you the question: did your mom talk to you about your menstrual cycle before you had it?
kind of. Okay,
kind
so
of.
let me explain that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there was a book. So mama got me because she was like, well, she thought I had my menstrual cycle somewhere between third and fourth grade. So well, I don't know what age that is.
10, like
Yeah,
9, 10.
yeah. So my mama, she had hers around that same age. So she was like, I figured you was gonna have yours too. So she got me a book. It was a book by a little black girl on it. It was like my period and something. I can't remember what it was. And so in the summertime, she like read this book, and if you have any questions, and we talked about it. And I was like, oh, okay.
Mhm,
And so that was kind of like our period talk.
mhm.
And then when school happened, somewhere around like September, October, I had my period. And I was like, oh my God, kind of, and she was like, well, Ashley, you remember we talked about this in the summer? We read a book about it. This is what it is. So that was pretty much our period conversation.
Okay. And did you feel prepared? Like once she reminded you that you had this book and y'all had that conversation, did you feel prepared?
Yeah, I wasn't scared anymore. Like because when I woke up and had blood in my pants, I was kind of scared, kind of crying. And then
Right.
she explained what it was. I'm like, oh, okay. So I wasn't scared no more anymore. And then for me, so my godmother also was the teacher at the school I went to,
Mhm.
and so like she for like the first I don't know week or so, she would come get me during bathroom time and make sure I put my pad on correctly and all that stuff.
That's
And
so sweet. First of all, that's super sweet. You had your own little personal period doula who was like, "Come on, Ashley, because what we don't want is for this pad to go awry while you
yeah,
out here during recess or something like that." So that's
yeah,
okay. So let me go back to the question you asked me. The reason why I asked you that is that I think, generally speaking, in our culture, we don't do a good job of the through line, right? So, how do we make sure people know what's going to be happening to their bodies throughout their life? We kind of wait until people get to that space, and then we like, okay, look, this is what you need to know. This is what you need to do. We're not very good at preemptively, proactively, intentionally drawing the through line to be like, okay, so Ashley, you remember that you got your period when you were around 9 or 10. If you're 40 now, that means you've had a period for how long? 30 years. That's a long time. That also makes you the expert of your menstrual cycle.
okay.
You know everything about what it means to be Ashley Cobb as a menstruating person. You can
I
tell
do.
people how long your cycle lasts, what it typically looks like, how you feel, how you take care of yourself, the foods that you eat, the clothes that you wear, the things you can participate in, the things you don't like to participate in. You know all of that. No one has had the conversation with you. Well, and Ashley, one day this is going to end.
Right. No one.
So your menstrual cycle and menopause are interconnected because menopause is literally the day after you have not had a menstrual cycle for 365 days or for 12 consecutive months. And I feel like that's really important for me to say for anybody who might be watching this or listening to this, because so much of our conversation right now, especially because menopause has become very, very popular to talk about, and
Mhm.
there's a lot more information that's being shared in the public square. What we're really talking about is the perimenopause experience. That's the thing that people are really focused on. And that perimenopause experience is essentially the pregame. So, menopause is a large umbrella. And under that, you have perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause. As Black women, we tend to experience menopause earlier and longer. So, that perimenopause time can come online in your 30s. It can last 8 to 10 years. We do often experience the physical kind of manifestations of menopause more intensely. So, like, we were talking about hot flashes. Not everybody has a hot flash. That is not the unifier that will make you in menopause. The unifier is that you have a uterus and ovaries. And if you were once menstruating and then you stop, that's the unifier. Everybody who has a uterus and ovaries will be a menopausal person at some point in their life. And I just think that we haven't done a great job, especially kind of post Reagan era, in like comprehensive health and sex education. It just feels like it's been, a constant battle and fight to make sure that women, girls, non-binary, queer folk understand what's going to be happening to their bodies throughout their lifetime. Like, what does it mean to be menstruating? What does it mean to understand the different choices you have around contraceptives? What does it mean to understand yourself as a sexual person and the different ways you might want to express yourself? What does it mean to have a different gender identity? Like, all of those things have become the work of mostly, I think, social justice organizations or reproductive health, reproductive justice organizations that are trying to um, fill in the gap that was left in schools. Because when I was in school, Ashley, let me tell you something. Fifth and sixth grade, we had a hella comprehensive health and sex education course. I
Really?
Yes. Now this, I'm also 58. I'm gonna be 58. So that means I was in elementary school in the 70s. So
Okay.
1979. When I say they ran the gamut of all of the things you could think about that you needed to know about what your body is and how your body moves, and then when we had the sex education portion, I was like, this is deep. This is deep. Yeah.
Because by the time I got to school in the 90s, that was not happening.
That was not happening. So I think a few things happened. The social political climate changed tremendously after Jimmy Carter was president, and when Reagan came in with Reaganomics, and the kind of the similar thing that we're seeing right now with the political climate, there was all of this dismantling of systems, public education, different programs, community organizations. People lost funding, all these things, and so I think that that's one reason. But another reason I think that people don't talk about it, people just don't want to always address something that feels a little nebulous. It's not a one size fits all experience to go through menopause. And because it's not, I don't think anyone feels like they can speak with authority in that way. But you can speak with authority from your experience and then share that with other people, which is basically what we've done. We've tried to collect so many different types of stories that hopefully if you were to listen to a story or come to an event or read something that we've written, you would be like, I see myself in this story, because we're trying to be very intentional about the margins, you know?
So, question. So, you mentioned perimenopausal can sometimes happen like when you're in your 30s.
hmm
So, if we're all looking for like hot flashes signs, like those type of symptoms, and that doesn't happen to everybody, so how do you know you're perimenopausal? Like, is there's a telltale sign, or do you have to go to your doctor? They're like, oh, by the way, like you're perimenopausal. How do we know?
Right. A couple things I would encourage, because look, I'm gonna keep using you as an example. And since you have 30 years of experience on Ashley, you could write a paper on Ashley's period. You
Right.
could, you could write a poem to Ashley's period. You could write a paper on Ashley's period. When you start to notice things becoming a little different, it could be you could have expanded stretches between your periods. You're like, I'm usually a 21, 28-day cycle person, or I'm a 30-day cycle person. And then all of a sudden you're noticing that you're 13 days, 20 days, 45 days, 60 days, 21 days, 23 days. You're like, okay, what's that about? Right?
Okay.
So a lot of times we immediately go to, maybe I'm pregnant, maybe I'm not. What's going on? I don't know. And you go to the doctor and you say, I'm noticing some differences in my menstrual cycle. Now, as a black person who just turned 40, then I say, well, we'll think about what kind of contraceptives you're on, and let's see what's going on. My recommendation would be to say, listen, I've been doing some research on menopause, and I understand that black women experience menopause earlier. Is it possible that I'm perimenopausal, and how might we test for that? Because you can receive blood work, you can receive a urinalysis, you can also do your own tracking and say, I've been tracking my period for the past 6 months and has been all over the place. Or it's just started to change recently. So it is a question of you being able to kind of like identify, this is feeling different. Now you might have hot flashes too, or you might have night sweats, or you might be noticing that you're having a hard time focusing, brain fog, forgetting things like that. There are over 60 physical possibilities of
Jesus.
menopause, and not all of them are negative. We focus so much on
Jesus.
how horrible this experience can be. I'm a little bit of a nerd and a futurist. I like sci-fi. I like speculative fiction. So I like to use the analogy like, when have you ever seen a shapeshifter in a movie or read about a shapeshifter in a book and it was just a very smooth, soft experience? Never.
Mm.
Never. There's something very complex and dynamic about going through menopause. Will you be in pain? Will you have an awful experience? I don't know. I don't know that. That will be something for you to identify, something that will be specific to your journey. Some people just wake up and be like, you know what? I ain't had a period in a few months, and then they start tracking, and they're like, oh snap, I might be perimenopausal. So it really depends on the individual. really depends on your family history. It really depends on your lived experience. Some people experience medical menopause because they have gone through cervical cancer or endometrial cancer, or they've had ovarian insufficiency, or they've had polycystic ovarian syndrome, PCOS. And we know in the Black community, a lot of folk with PCOS, endometriosis, and fibroids. So they might end up going through medical menopause because they had a hysterectomy. So there are a lot of pathways to menopause. But I want anyone who's standing at the kind of trailhead of your menopause journey to have your own map and know where you're going. And I think that we have done a disservice, in particular in the Black community, to making sure that folk know this is where you just came from, right? Didn't you just come from this whole menstrual journey? Uh huh. This is where you're about to go. And so, what are your provisions? What do you need to take with you? Because your life does not end when you go through menopause at all. It does not.
That's good. Not that I thought it did end, but I think especially from like there's so much tied to identity, tied to women in their childbearing years,
Of course.
right?
Of
And
course.
so when you get to the place where you can no longer bear children,
Hmm.
a lot of people lose their identity. Like, oh my God, I can't do that one thing. And so like, what am I here for type of thing.
Yeah.
And then like I always hear about how menopause affects sex.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's always I've heard some positive stories, but for the most part, it's mainly like, oh, you get menopause and you quit want to have sex and it dries out, child, and you don't have a libido no more, and you're just like So
Hmm.
all those things are associated, they're negative associated. So it's good to hear that some positives somewhere.
There are definitely some positives somewhere. So, first, a couple of things about sex and menopause. And because of the work that you do and the offerings that you make to community, you know that you have multiple sexual debuts throughout your life. And
Hmm.
so when I think about my first sexual debuts, which is not necessarily sexual intercourse, but the first time I experienced sexual pleasure, and it took me for a loop. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know why I was feeling. I knew it felt good,
Hmm.
but I was like, what was that? Right? And I think that that continues to happen throughout your lifetime where you're like, huh, wow, that's a new thing. I hadn't experienced that before. And of course, you have much more consciousness as you get older around sex and sexuality, you would hope. Now, the other thing that I know is very much true inside of cultures where, culturally speaking, your family of origin, how you were raised, if you were raised in a family that didn't talk about bodies, that didn't talk about sex, that didn't talk about pleasure, or shamed bodies, shamed sex, you may have never had a good experience with your own body and sex. So
Hmm.
to then also go through menopause, where your identity has been so tightly tethered to family, your title, your role inside your family, it can feel like a very scary proposition to go through menopause and also be thinking, you mean I could actually be experiencing some of the best sex I've ever had in my life right now? Yeah, you can. You can. So, is good sex possible throughout the menopause experience? Yes, it is. Will that require you sometimes, depending on the individual, to be more in tune with what your body needs? Yes. The things that I enjoyed and liked, some of those things are evergreen, right? I'm not
Hmm.
going to list those things because I don't want anybody to be like, homie, I understand that this is the thing that you like. You said this to Ashley. I want to know if I can advise you. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. There are some things I don't like anymore. And I think there were some things I was doing that were, quite frankly, performative.
Hmm.
I've had great sex, I've had mediocre sex, I've had trash sex. And in the mediocre trash sex um, portions of my life, I was performative to get through it, whether that was silence or like a couple of moans here and there and be like, and then also like disassociating in a way to think, I cannot wait to tell my girlfriends how terrible this was. Like, I'm so over this right now. This is,
Yes, awful.
and I have no desire. to experience something like that at this stage of my life. I haven't had that desire in quite some time, quite frankly. And I do think that menopause offers you a kind of honesty. We talk about the aunties telling the truth. We talk about these older women who are out here really claiming themselves. That is definitely a true thing.
It is.
Oh yeah, with menopause and sex, absolutely.
So I've interviewed several women who are like 60 and over.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the ladies was late 70s, right? And she was saying how like she is still out here getting it
Mm-hmm.
and still out here enjoying it.
That's right.
And one of the ladies who I interviewed, she was 60 in her 60s, and she was saying how she said that her sex life is better now than it was when she was like my age or younger. And she attributed that to one kind of knowing her body now. She knows her body better than she did when she was 30 or 20.
Absolutely.
Her kids are grown, so she doesn't have the worry or wonder of motherhood or whatever that is. And she just like now she's more focused on herself and her needs.
Mm-hmm. I check and check. Like I just feel like menopause offers you such honesty. It's like I look at my body every morning. I mean, one
Okay.
of my morning rituals, I get up, go take my shower, and I come back in my room and I look at my body. And I'm looking at how my body's changed. Like my hair wasn't gray like this growing up. This is the last however many years of graying, and go gray everywhere. So I just want to put that out there for the universe. So,
Yes, you do. So let me say that right quick. So I went gray. This is TMI, but we here now. So
mm-hmm.
I went gray down below before I went gray on my head.
Listen, and I listen. So many people are like, "Wait a minute." I'm like, I just feel like you should be prepared, just so you
And
don't.
no one told me that.
I told you, so you just looking around like, well, was someone gonna say something? You gonna say something? I'm looking at my body because I want to see how I'm changing. I also want to try to like love up on myself.
Hmm.
So I'm like, today only them 57-year-old thighs are looking pretty incredible.
Hmm.
Now, some days I look at myself and I'm like, wow, your breast has decided to migrate so much closer to your belly button. Like, it's just like the whole gravitational pull has changed. Still like my breast, but I also know that my breasts have changed. One thing I am very appreciative of is that I know my body. I know what I like. I know what I don't like. I know what I'm open to, what I'm
Hmm.
curious about. I know what I desire intellectually and emotionally to stimulate me, because if I'm not stimulated intellectually or creatively, she's not stimulated.
Hmm.
She'll be like, we should just make a sandwich and watch a movie or something. But this is not going to happen. And I'm very clear that I need a different type of stimulation, a different kind of foreplay, which is not all physical.
Hmm.
Some of it is physical, but not all of it is physical. And I also feel like being able to engage in self pleasure feels much more powerful for me over the last 15, 20 years as well. It's like I definitely enjoy partnered sexual experiences, but I also enjoy myself. And being able to talk about that frankly with my friends, to talk about that frankly with my teammates at Black Girls Guide, to be able to talk about it frankly publicly, to kind of, push the taboo aside, because it's real. There's so many people that I have met who are in their 50s and 60s who've never masturbated,
Hmm.
and want to, but feel weird about it or shame about it or confusion about how to even begin. And so, like, how do we invite that? And so I think inviting, just touching yourself, like touching yourself,
Hmm.
touching your own skin, touching your own body before you decide that you are ready to explore touching yourself for pleasure is a good place to start. Like, we're so functional with ourselves. We washing, we throwing on lotion, we throwing on cologne, we out the door. But touch yourself. touch
Yeah.
touch the softness, touch the way that the texture of your skin has changed as you've gotten older. What's different, what's strong, what's soft, what's supple, what's rough, all those things.
So, what are your thoughts on hormone replacement therapy? I know a lot of women are researching that or doing that once
Mhm.
in their when they're menopausal years. So what are your thoughts on that?
So my thoughts are that hormone replacement therapy is a definite option for a lot of people.
Okay.
There was a research study that came out a little over 20 years ago that really freaked people out.
Okay.
Like, if you do hormone replacement therapy, it can lead to cancer, it can lead to cardiovascular disease, all these different things. But what has happened in the last 6 years or so, they went back and looked at that research study and they realized that the research was not done well. And it was also done with an aging population. So we're talking apples to oranges. There are a lot of options out there if you need hormonal support. So you could do HRT, or sometimes people call that menopause replacement therapy. You could do the creams, so the progesterone cream, the estradiol cream. You could do the patch. Some people have also done testosterone and taken testosterone, the testosterone pellets. So it really depends on you. One of the things I always recommend, because I'm not an OBGYN or a reproductive endocrinologist, but if you are noticing that you're having issues that may live in the land of hot flashes, night sweats, issues that might live in the land of vaginal atrophy, dryness, loss of libido, you talk to your doctor and say, here's what I want to know. I need 3 options that will help me. You've been my doctor. You know my medical history. You know what treatments I've had. You know whatever medical issues I may or may not have had. What are my 3 best options? And explore that with them. But tell them they need to give you 3 options for you to explore. And I think that's really important because, again, people feel like, well, if I can't do that one thing, then there's nothing I can do. And that's not actually accurate either. There are a lot of options out there.
So do you know of any like natural remedies or things that are not? So what do you suggest with that route?
Yeah. So, we've had conversations with herbalists and folk who follow a more homeopathic path to taking care of things. And so there's some non-traditional homeopathic herbal remedies like wild yam or red raspberry or black cohosh and things like that. So, and you can also get over-the-counter medication that has more of a herbal blend. If you talk to a medical doctor, they might say, well, that's not tested, it's not FDA approved, so they would not necessarily endorse that. I'm a big fan of give the people the information and let them make the choice for themselves.
Okay.
I'm a big fan of if I give you enough information and you feel like you have agency, then you can make the best decision for yourself.
Right.
And so you may decide. So, case in point, I noticed that when I drink a lot of caffeine,
Mhm.
hot flashes happen. So I had to reduce my caffeine intake pretty significantly while I was perimenopausal and definitely once I was in menopause. So while I love coffee, I'm not a coffee girl anymore. I'm a mushroom coffee person, which has a much lower level of caffeine in it. I'm also a tea drinker. I drink all kinds of teas, but I have to pay attention because black tea still has caffeine in it, but not nearly as much as coffee. So I noticed that when I eat very spicy foods, I could end up with a hot flash. So while I love spicy foods, I can't do that all the time. I also noticed that red wine gives me a migraine headache because of the tannins in it. That didn't bother me before I was menopausal, but I notice now that I can have a glass, maybe 2, of red wine, but that's it. That's it.
So how long do the menopause symptoms last? Are they once you hit that space, do they last forever?
With I say I'm postmenopausal, but literally postmenopausal is a forever thing. This is the new me until I'm gone. You know, so all that information is helping me right now, and hopefully will help me for the next 40, 50 years. However long I'm going to be blessed to be here. So forever, how long that is, I know that caffeine is not my friend. I know that spicy foods can upset my thing. I also know that I need to rest better. I know that fatigue also brings on stuff too. So being postmenopausal is like my new identity for the duration. Yeah.
So how were you able to narrow it down to like caffeine? Did you just like, oh, well, I drink coffee a day, headache, or did you like talk to somebody and like, well, this might be reason for that?
Both and how we have conversations with our friends. I was like, what I have noticed, also because I do social justice work, we would guzzle coffee. Guzzle, guzzle, guzzle. Somebody's always making coffee in the office, always making coffee. And so I was like, good God Almighty, these hot flashes are kicking my tail. Like, I'm trying to figure out what is going on. And then, I talk to I talk to myself. Something else that you do in menopause, you might have conversations with yourself quite a bit. And I was like, self,
I said, huh?
huh? I said, you know what I noticed? I noticed that when I have more than 3 cups of coffee, I have hot flashes. I'm gonna do my own little anthropological study on myself, and I'm gonna pull back and see what happens. And so I just started noticing, and then I brought it to my both my OBGYN and my primary care physician are very much team up. Like these are doctors that I've had for over 20 years. They know that I do social justice work, so if I roll into my doctor's office with with a notebook, they know I mean business. They're like, "Oh Lord, she done brought the journal." I'm like, "Listen, I got some questions. I've looked up some things. I got some." They're like, "Okay." But I did. I was like, I've noticed that caffeine is really bothering me. And so then we got to have a really great, earnest conversation about caffeine not being your friend. And
Okay.
so I was encouraged by my doctor, like affirming me. It's like, yeah, that's probably the case. And so I think it's a both and of trusting your body, you paying attention to different things, and then bringing that information to the medical professional that you trust and that is working with you to be like, I have noticed these things. What's your opinion on that? What do you think about that? What's the research say? Now, know that most doctors did not receive any significant training around menopause. So having a doctor that is humble enough to say, you know what, Ashley, I'm not sure I know a lot about that, but I'm going to do some research. When you come back,
I'll get.
we gonna have that conversation. And if that is a doctor who doesn't talk to you that way, then perhaps they shouldn't be your doctor. Because I think it's important to humanize you, me, but the doctors need to humanize themselves, and it's not possible for you to know everything.
Right.
And it's really okay for you to say, this is something I need to do some research on. Let me do my homework. And when we
And
come
come
back
back.
together, I'm going to tell you what I figured out. Cool. Do your thing. I'm
Right.
grateful. And we gonna figure this out together.
Right. I agree with that. You can fire your doctors,
You
people.
can fire your doctor. You do not have to struggle. You do not have to be mistreated. The misogyny, the patriarchy, and the racism is everywhere you go, whether it's at your job, at the grocery store, in the doctor's office, wherever it is. You don't have to entertain that. You can
You
be like,
don't.
I'm good. Thank you.
So it's very important. I tell people, like, even with the advocacy work that I do around HIV and AIDS and prevention, like, you need to find a doctor that you can talk to and who can listen and hear your needs. If you're having a doctor who you feel like every time they come to the door, like their back is basically to the door, they quickly in, quickly out, not really listening to you, or you can't really talk about what your problems are, then you need a new doctor. They're not the one for you. And so finally, Omni. So if you had to leave Black women with one piece of advice about thriving during menopause, what would it be?
I think that thriving during menopause is first about a mindset. I think I would want to ask some questions. Are you happy right now? Have you created a life where you have determined what is satisfiable for you? Satisfiable in terms of your work, satisfiable in terms of your relationships, friendships and romantic, satisfiable in terms of your sex life, satisfiable in terms of your community life, your spiritual life. Are you happy? Have you found a rhythm that is satisfiable to you? And if you haven't, what do you need to do that? How can you get there? Because you should have a life that you feel very happy with. I feel like I consistently am striving to find my satisfiable self in these different places, right? And if I can't find her, then I know there's something I need to do. I either need to adjust myself,
Mm-hmm.
which is my thinking, my mindset, my beliefs, we do a whole lot of unlearning. Gen Xers are like really trying to unlearn a whole lot of stuff, you know?
Yeah.
And this whole perfectionism, this hyper productivity, that's a hard thing to unlearn. And also, as a Black Southern woman, this like work, 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 work. That's also something I'm constantly like striving to unlearn because I want my satisfaction not attached to what I can produce, but attached to who I am,
Oh,
just who
I
I am.
like that.
And that's not easy to do, actually, because we have been told you can't show up somewhere half-assed, not
You
as a
can't.
Black person.
A Black person.
Absolutely not. My parents were always like, listen, you show up with put your best foot forward, you dot all your I's, you cross all your T's, you CYOA. And that lived so deeply in my
Mm-hmm.
head before I even started doing social justice work. Like, to add on top of that, you doing something that's about the liberation of our people. You don't have the ability to rest. You don't have the ability to, experience joy all the time. And so I think it's been a real journey for me. And I would offer and extend that to anybody who's listening to our conversation or to the podcast, is to find your satisfiable self that's attached to just who you are, and love up on that. Love up on that.
Yeah. So how can people find you and how can people find your platform?
Absolutely. So you can find us at www.blackgirlsguide to surviving menopause. If you go to the website, you can tap into our podcast and old episodes. We also are on Substack. We have a really fun multimedia journal called Hippolyta's Journal. We named it after the character Hippolyta from Lovecraft Country. We were like absolutely
Huh?
obsessed with Angelou Ellis's portrayal of Hippolyta Freeman. It was so great. So we have different writing offerings there. You can check us out on Instagram at Black Girls Guide to Menopause. And just, we have our newsletter. And this year, we're actually going to be hosting our very first international conference for people of the global majority. Most of the gatherings, conferences, and events focus cis, white, hetero women. This conference is focused on the global majority, Black, Indigenous, Asian, Latinx, Mediterranean, queer, trans, young, and old. So just follow us and find out more information about that too. Maybe you can hang out with us at the conference in October.
And where's the conference?
It's going to be in North Carolina, in Durham,
In October?
in October 9th to the 12th.
Okay, send me the dates.
Well,
Send me the dates.
yeah, I will send you the dates. I will
Thank
send
you.
you.
Yeah, I want to come.
You will have an amazing time.
Okay.
Guaranteed.
Well, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah.
Hold on. Let me stop this.